Hello guys, good afternoon. I'm trying to have this pinned down. Yes, that's it. Hi, welcome. My name is Mercy Abang, and I am a temporal guest here, hosting this live for an hour. My guest is Dr. Oby Ezekwesili. I'm sure she'll be joining us soon, but I thought to introduce myself while everybody joins so we can have an interesting conversation. I hope we're keeping safe, we're washing our hands. Please, you can ask your questions when the conversation starts, and I will gladly ask her the questions. But I'll start by asking her the questions first, then I throw the floor open to everybody to ask their questions. Please follow the instructions. Do not ask your questions on the timeline. Ask your questions by tapping the questions box. Yes. I am waiting for Dr. Oby Ezekwesili to join us. When she does, we can start the conversation. My name is Mercy. I am happy to be here. A temporal EIE host for the day. An hour, then I'm out. Welcome, 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 everybody. I hope I can see her when she does join. Okay, not yet. So I hope we're keeping safe. My name is Mercy. Okay, I should tell you about myself. My name is Mercy Abang, and I'm a journalist. I am currently studying. And what else? I am from Cross River State. But today is not about me, you know. Today is about Dr. Oby Ezekwesili. I am hosting this show for an hour. I am a guest. Should I say a guest host or host? Yeah, something like that. For Enough is Enough Nigeria. I'm glad you can hear me. If you can hear me, say hi, so I know my audio is correct. While we wait for Dr. Oby, please send in your questions. It doesn't matter how early you start sending them. The earlier the better, really. So as soon as she joins us, we can start. Yes. Ola is asking about me. Okay, yeah. My name is Mercy Abang. I don't know. I don't think I have so much to say about myself than the first name and the second name and the fact that I'm a journalist, and yes. Please kindly ask your questions by tapping the questions box. Do not ask your questions on the, should I say timeline now? On the screen, yes, because I want us to be able to see the face of our guest. We are still waiting for Dr. Oby Ezekwesili. I am your host, Mercy Abang. Welcome. Probably I should just say a bit about Dr. Oby Ezekwesili rather than myself. Dr. Oby is a two-time minister in Nigeria. She's an activist. She's an economic policy expert. She's an advisor to governments within Africa. She's done a lot of work, and if you recall, she's been a frontline campaigner for the return of the abducted Chibok girls. She just concluded her fellowship, I think last month in Germany, and she's launched a Fixed Politics initiative. And I'll be really excited for her to tell us about that program when she comes on. Yeah, you know, she's done a lot of work. Okay, let's see. Let's see. How do I do this? Okay, she's here. Good. How does this work? Okay. Okay. I never knew you had joined, and I kept talking and talking and talking. Good afternoon, Dr. Oby.
Good afternoon, Mercy. How are you? How is the Queen?
She's locked indoors. I hope she does not come out to interrupt. How are you doing?
I am doing great. Could be better. I mean, these times are pretty tough on many families.
I can imagine. I'll probably just start because we are already behind time. You wrote an article, a viral article for an international medium, and you did ask for reparations for Africa from China. And one would be wondering, why should China pay for a pandemic?
Well, you know, I do make a very important point that global risks are often so cyclically taking down Africa's economic growth and development. And that, you know, when powerful economies, when rich economies are the ones that sort of don't take responsibility as should be in order to mitigate against or prevent global risks, then when it affects the weak and vulnerable, there is a cost. There is a cost, and you know that cost is that they have been shortchanged because they now have to go back to the start of line again to try to build back to economic growth. And if we are a world that's concerned about global inequalities, we have no business allowing the rich and powerful to injure the poor and vulnerable.
But okay, I mean, it's an interesting perspective, but shouldn't that cover probably say developing countries, not just Africa?
Well, you know, I make a case for this on the basis of Africa being the continent that has the largest concentration of extreme poverty. Some 70% of the world's extremely poor people are on the continent of Africa. As at last data, that should be about 400 million people living in extreme poverty on the continent. And to that extent, I make a very important case that there is a disproportionate burden that is placed upon these people when things that could have been better managed are left not well managed. In the case of the pandemic, the fact that we see clear indications of opaqueness around the way that the country from which it originated has handled the matter has meant that something that could have been stemmed was not stemmed. It went across the borders, landed on the continent of Africa, affected the global economy, took down, you know, the important spheres of economic endeavor that matter to the continent, and ended up, you know, really damaging many of these poor and vulnerable families that are today stressed beyond measure. We need to make an assertion about this. I do not have any apologies in the case that I make that the continent has been injured.
But interestingly, just after your article went viral, the German Chancellor also did ask for the same for Germany. and said, China is owing the country as a result of the pandemic, which is something that I find quite interesting as well.
That's quite interesting.
Yeah. You did make a case sometime back at I think it was University of Nigeria and Nsukka. It was a popular speech that the entire country was agog, and you said that Nigeria really needs to diversify her revenue sources. Do you feel vindicated at this point where Nigeria oil prices are almost at a zero cost completely? The fall in oil prices are affecting everybody, especially for a country like Nigeria. Do you feel vindicated?
I wish that, feeling vindicated would take care of the problem that we are now faced with. You don't want to be right on things that ultimately create an adversity on your society. I hate to be right when you forewarn about something that's ominous and something that can actually be prevented. And then it comes to pass. That's not when you say, oh, I do not say I told you. No, I don't care about that. I just feel so sad that, something that we could have planned for, we suddenly find ourselves in a situation where a pre-announced tragedy comes to us as a surprise. That is too upsetting. And so for me, I think that the critical thing is to establish that the best time for us to have taken seriously the dangers of being so monolithic in our source of income as a country was when that noise that they directed toward me was being made. The next best time to do it was when again, I think it was it must have been 2014 or thereabout, one began to talk about the danger of, leaving us to the vagaries of an oil market that you have no influence over. And then the next best time is, of course, now, so whatever happens, this continent, it goes beyond oil. It just covers 2/3 of the continent, where the countries depend on one commodity or the other, whether it be copper or diamonds or gold or whatever else that is, not based on productive human effort. Anywhere else that you have one commodity, basically determining the rise and fall of society, it is time for them to finally get the willpower to move away from that.
What would you suggest as the quick wins at this point?
Well, one major thing definitely is that the government needs to go back to some of the studies that have been done that have shown very important sectors of the economy that are low productivity and which can become high productivity or higher productivity by simply making sure that the right sets of policies are articulated for them. Whether it's in the creative industries or it's in the small and medium scale enterprises, whether in agribusiness, things like that, or it's in the financial services, it's in technology. There are many other sources of growth that we have, and most of these other sources of growth revolve around the capacity, the intellectual capacity of the Nigerian person. That capacity to innovate, capacity to produce. We need to emphasize that more than we're emphasizing something that is more or less a lottery ticket. Being an oil endowed economy is simply a lottery ticket. It's like, coming into a heirloom that you did not have any hand in. And that hasn't often led to a path of real growth and development. Only to the extent that you are very prudent and very judicious in your use of the proceeds from natural resources, translating it to your human capital as well as your infrastructure that is world-class, so that you can position yourself as a productive and competitive economy. That's when the benefit shows up. Otherwise, it just goes into consumption, and it just basically stagnates you into a bottom where you operate on rent rent from oil then becomes the basis for your life. Why should that be the case? This is a society with such entrepreneurial human beings. And I'm not talking about enterprise. I'm not talking about that entrepreneurial capacity. That is the ability to solve problems. When societies have people who can easily solve problems, then it means that it's got a large catchment of people who can innovate. And what they need would be the right policy environment, the right regulatory and institutional systems. And then they need government to do the important, set of investment that provides the ecosystem of public goods and services that they need in order to be the best that they can be.
The International Monetary Fund yesterday, I think, yes, day before yesterday, approved $3.4 billion for Nigeria. And there's been a lot of confusion as to if is this some special Christmas gift, or is it a loan?
It is a loan. It is a loan. It's a facility. It's a short-term facility, basically to support the balance of payment account. When an economy is under stress, and its balance of payment will create a problem for it in terms of the capacity to generate the necessary foreign exchange to back a lot of its economic activities. The IMF steps in and supports a very important backup, and it's like an emergency operation to stabilize any kind of crisis, monetary crisis that translates to fiscal crisis for that country. So it is a loan. It's just, it's a short-term loan. It's the kind of loan that's not a program. When a loan is not a program, it means that the IMF is not asking you to fulfill certain prior actions. That is some conditionalities that go toward addressing underlying structural issues in your economy. So they're getting this support. It's like getting a quick overdraft from your bank. It's a loan.
We woke up to news this morning that the president is adopting the Orosanyer's report that asks for the merging and of most MDAs. Are you certain that is, the government is serious about ensuring that we manage the current economic crisis, or the one that is to come post-COVID?
It's so sad that we now have to do this under a crisis, it's a triple crisis, as a context, because this was something that the government had a window of opportunity to have done as soon as it entered into office the first time in 2015. Like your honeymoon period is the period that as a government, you can push through very tough reforms. And so the cost of governance was a major, piece of work that the government needed to do. I can see that Zoe is already looking for your attention. And you know what? She's probably going to be the next sensation after that family, that interrupts their father every time he's doing an interview. So but I think you shouldn't be uncomfortable. Let people understand what it takes to be a professional young woman who's got to manage home front. All right, so just be calm. If Zoe wants to join, she can join us. All right, so basically, the thing is that the cost of governance is a major issue. When you have a public finance constraint, you normally have to look at your revenue, how to improve the envelope of your revenue. And so that's why government's efforts toward ensuring that the private sector thrives and does more and then earns more profit so that tax can be higher. That's focusing on the revenue. When the government is saying we want to expand the sources of economic growth, find new sources, new things that people invest into and make profit so they can tax them, that's part of the revenue side. But and the one that is immediate, because even your revenue side does take time to be clawed in, right? To come on stream. But the one that can be immediate is to look at your expenditure side. And that expenditure side can tell you a lot. If your expenditure side is not an efficient and productive expenditure side, then it means that you have a lot of slack inside of it, and you can squeeze it a little bit more so that you can ease up additional resources that would help you tackle things that are priority. So when you look at the structure of the Nigerian budget and the expenditure side, you find all kinds of funny stuff in there. And that's because we haven't paid attention to the fact that we should be using our public resources well. We should, nobody is accountable for poor use of public resources. So over the years, we've become used to government as a loose expenditure environment where people, can just develop some bourgeoisie taste simply because they've been called into public office. That's wrong. That is totally wrong, because every penny, every dollar, or rather every naira that is wasted on the expenditure side in government has an opportunity cost. The opportunity cost many more children who are not in school, women who die during childbirth in the 21st century, children who would die before the age of 5, poor nutrition for children. The cost of a poor management of your budgetary resources is too huge for you to have wasted this number of years since after that report was submitted. So, I am of course happy that they finally saw the light, but I must say that, they could have saved us a lot by seeing that light in 2015.
I mean, there's so much conversation around how we're going to generate revenue for Abuja, then the states take home. There's little that is being said about states and what they can do. What do you think, states can on their own do to ensure that they can also generate revenue in these difficult times?
So, I think that the Nigerian Bureau for Statistics has been quite good in some initiative it had launched where it basically ranks states in terms of internally generated revenues. And that, that data, the fact that it began to gather that data was so insightful. So we could see states that merely just exist in order to wait for the quarterly or is it the monthly FAC meeting, that is the Federation Allocation Committee meeting. And when you look at that league table, it's probably maybe less than 10% of the states have anything that is that can be called material being generated internally. And the reason is that, for many decades, there was no consequence for a governor to be just one who is a distributor of rent that comes from the oil in the Niger Delta. It just became the incentive that powered interest in our politics for people to just be comfortable to win elections and then be called excellencies for distributing rent from oil. The people in the state are not saying to the governor, what is the productive thing that is going on in our state? When we talk about the environment for doing business, states also have environment for doing business. The smaller businesses mostly operate at the state level. The SMEs that have powered the economic growth or that we have seen in countries like Singapore, Singapore, some 60 to 70% of its economic growth is from the small and medium scale enterprises. So the kind of environment that incentivizes those small and medium scale enterprises to thrive can be provided at the state level. But many of these governors don't see it because, that's not ready-made. They want the ready-made one. And what we should do is demand for more accountability. We should be able to look at a governor who wants to run for a second time. What did you generate during your first term? What was your internal revenue?
Just so I serve as a bit of an advocate for the governors right now. I'm not the governor, but maybe this would do. There's an argument around the concurrent and the exclusive list. You were in mining. don't you think they're a bit limited? Don't you think some of these governors are a bit limited as to what to do?
No, they are not. They are not limited, even within the very skewed framework that we have. When it comes to the matter of the economy, I think that the most important thing that the federal government does for the economy is creating the macroeconomic environment, the macroeconomic context. So everything that's got to do with my monetary policy, that central bank level, and then the things that at the fiscal level, that is the Federal Ministry of Finance level, it has to do. So national systems of taxation, where the federal government is the apex body for it. So this macroeconomic context that the government creates at the center is very important. Now, in terms of sectoral activities, I think that the opportunity the governors have to coordinate effort with the federal government through the National Council for the National Council on the economy, this NEC, the National Economic Council. It is chaired by the Vice President. So that brings them to the place where they can look at issues of environment, of doing business. You know, they can look at sectors, they can look at opportunities, they can solve problems together and identify the challenges that are barriers to the growth of industry at the state level. The tools are there. I just think that our politics has been very, very upside down. We have a very indolent political environment. It rewards it rewards a lot of laziness, slothfulness. It rewards a spirit of enjoyment. That's why people look, they think of people being in government and they think, oh, this is being in government is a luxury. It's an opportunity. Who does that? Who thinks that way? In decent societies, nobody is being asked to go into government, into elective office or appointment situations so that they can go and enjoy. It's the enjoyment mindset that has destroyed the capacity, and it has distorted the incentive and to actually engage in productive effort. And our governors are getting away with it. The people at the state level shouldn't let governors get away with it anymore.
A lot of young people are on this conversation. They joined us, and I'm already having lots of questions for you. But before I start taking some of their questions, can you tell us a bit about the fixed policy politics initiative that you did about 2 months ago? I think it was February. Yes, if I'm not. Yes, tell us about that initiative,
right? And
why do you think we have to have politics?
Look, one thing that is evident based on a lot of research studies is that without good governance, it's impossible for a country to grow and to grow on a steady path and heighten growth and solidify growth and expand growth in the way that it then begins to get into development and create prosperity and reduce poverty, within its territory. And so if without good governance, you can't get any of this, you can't get a prosperous society, you can't get a stable society, you can't get an inclusive society, it means that, tackling the things that stand in the way of good governance is, core and fundamental to any citizen in a society. And so looking at the things that impede good governance, it came clearly eventually through the scrutiny and through the research that actually, if you don't fix your politics, you're never going to get good governance. So a lot of people usually sort of wait and say, okay, let the elections finish and then we would start asking for good governance. Well, who are you asking good governance from? Are you going to ask good governance from people who completely don't have the mindset of, good governance, or who don't even have the training basic training to understand the culture of result and accountability in governance. So what it means, therefore, is that rather than wait to do this downstream, you need to do it upstream before they even begin to get into the place of position. Yeah, you need to get the politics to work, to function in a way that the electorate, as well as the political class and the political environment within which they interact, will deliver better outcomes and results of governance. And so the idea that we must change this political culture where politics does not deliver and it doesn't mean anything. So every 4 years we go on a cycle where another group of people just come and they do the same thing and then begin to compare themselves to the poor performance of the previous group. And, that you just going, it's like spinning a wheel, and for citizens, this is costly. Because when you see what's going on, I say to people that those who pretend that they are middle class in Nigeria, all they need to do is to ignore politics for another decade, and they would find that they would join the class of the extremely poor very soon. You can't ignore politics.
There's a question from Fatu Oguchi, and she's asking, what do you think about Nigeria's political future?
What I think is that it is in the hands of the citizens. The citizens can redesign everything that has worked in life is based on a design. And what we have not done well is that important job of designing. What future do we want to see? We've got to design it. And so my idea of fixed politics is to get citizens together so we can design the kind of political future we want. We want a political future where the idea of the ideals of social contract between citizens and those that govern them would become a thing. It would become a real thing, and you don't get a political culture where you think that your business as a political leader is to subvert the common good to your own personal interests. That should end. It's a distortion. It's an anomaly, and we must fix it. So the political future would be brilliant when citizens understand the enormous power that they wield. And that's where this whole construct of the office of the citizen, being able to understand that collective action of citizens can design a pathway toward a future where our politics really delivers on equality of opportunity for all citizens to thrive, regardless of what it is, what kind of decent work, what kind of decent engagement you want to pursue in this society. We must be able to have an environment of our political culture that gives you the opportunity to do it without any form of hindrance on your way.
There's a question from Oyindak. The government proposed a budget review based on the fall in the price of crude. What's your take?
Well, they have no choice. I mean, that thing, I remember when we were growing up, there was that famous song, 1 pound, no balance. They have no choice. This 1 pound is not balancing. If you've lost more than 60% of your revenue, because some 70% of the budget comes from oil, and you see the kind of the shutdown that oil price has suffered. So that kind of an exogenous shock has meant that the revenue of government is now some 4 trillion or thereabout, and then the total budget of government is almost 11 trillion. So the government is carrying with it some 7 trillion deficit. My goodness, these are the interesting times, Mercy. Every citizen should know that these are interesting times. These are really, really interesting times because the government is doing what it says to be the best it can do by going borrowing. But with borrowing comes the need to service your interest, your loan, and already debt service as a percentage of revenue was already out of the world. You know, and so you really are faced with very serious, you know, situation going forward. I think that a major issue that is going to increasingly be important is for us to have a conversation around economic governance. You know, what kind of structure do we need as a country to dig ourselves out of this stagnation? You know, we're stuck in a low equilibrium a situation. And when you're stuck in that, it becomes a structural issue. It is not something that you can just pray that oil prices will increase so you go back to where you were. No, that's not going to happen. It's best to, you know, now convene a conversation around economic governance and the kind of, you know, structure that we need in order to take ourselves to a productive and competitive economy.
Someone has just asked a question about vote buying and how it can and how Nigeria can move forward from that point, because it seems as though it's getting worse. You know, from 1999 to date, the vote buying conversation, every election year we move from one point to another. As a matter of fact, right now, I think the last election, it was so brazen that even members of the civil society had to scream. What's the solution to vote buying?
I wish there were an easy solution to vote buying, but because, you know, for you to solve a problem, you need to be analytical and understand exactly what it is that are the drivers of the problem. So vote buying is something that happens, you know, between the segment of our electorate that are low income and the politicians, right? You know, because hardly do you see a middle class a person, you know, standing on the queue to vote and collecting 500 naira or 1,000 or even 5,000 naira, you know. So it's something that's going on between our very venal political class and the low income class in our society. And guess what? The low income class in our society, the people at that bottom of the pyramid, they are the ones who are very loyal to elections. You'll see them. They consciously come out to vote. But guess what? The reason they come out to vote is that the day of election is a day of transaction. Their level of productivity is so low that on a daily basis, they generate income that is anywhere close enough to what they are given. On that day, they stand on the line. So for them, what they get on that day is a doubling of their income for the day. And they live for a day. They don't live for a future. So whereas you and your colleagues in journalism, in media, were screaming because you're thinking, oh my God, 4 years, you're selling your future. The low income person is saying, my future is today. My future is today. My low productivity means that every additional income that I can get means that I will survive today. And so they are thinking, you know, before I felt that they were not rational in their thought, but now I realize how rational they are. It's rational thought. They are saying tomorrow is not guaranteed by anything in what I have so far experienced. Therefore, today is what they are living for, and the income from from selling their vote doubles their opportunity for that day. And so they make a rational decision, therefore, to trade it. So low productivity is a major issue. For you to solve this matter of selling of vote, we need to focus on the barriers to higher productivity of the people in our informal sector, who are the ones that mostly make up our low income community. And that means if we dig deeper, we would see that there are two segments that make up this group: the women as well as the young people. These people are people who we can think of and say, what are the barriers to the improvement of their productivity? And then we, not, you know, because those in government may have no interest to end this kind of a menace. It is favorable to them. They are the ones that buy the vote, right? So they may not have an incentive to change this situation. That's why sometimes people say, oh, it's in the interest of the politicians to keep Nigerians poor. That's what people are alluding to when they say that. So who is it that can then step in to begin to work toward changing this low productivity situation that we have? It has to be non-governmental bodies. It has to be citizens who consciously are interested in changing the kind of distorted voting environment that we have. So what can they do? They can take, for example, the women in the business world, the traders, the petty traders, and we can understand what it is that stands in their way, from instead of struggling all through the day in the sun, that woman who is waiting for there to be the lockdown to be over so she can carry her tray and go to the streets, and at the end of the day you look at the wares that she has in that tray and it's nothing close to 2,000, and so the profit she would make in a given day would be less than 500. So you want to find them and figure out what it is that we can do to then begin to change their low productivity to a place where they begin to earn sufficient amount of money, but not just earn money, in giving them the capacity to be more productive. Consciousness, design the kind of work that Fatou did so brilliantly are things that have to do with political literacy. Political literacy, I believe that I saw Fatou Oguche on online or something, so, political literacy, which consciously changes the understanding of the low-income class when you have improved their productivity and saying to them that, guys, you can do better than this. So they get to the point where somebody who is waving 10,000 naira at them, they are saying, Oga, I can feed more than 10,000 naira. What I want now is to scale up my opportunity so that my children will get quality education, quality health, have access to environment in which they can thrive. They begin to engage in a conversation that is sophisticated. Until we do that, I'm telling you, I'm not trying to be a party, what do they call that? A party or something, but I am being very frank with you that we have a lot of work to do in changing this in an analytical way what we have been given. What we've been given is a useless kind of politics, a political culture that is very corrupting. It's a corrupted one, and it is a corrupting one. And so we have to be stronger than just merely shouting about it, being angry about it. We've got to get to work. We've got to get to work.
It's interesting how you describe the man who collects the 5,000 naira at the polling booth. I never saw it this way. It's always so easy for you to criticize and say, why are you taking 500? But when you look at it that, you're making twice as much for that day, that's it, But there's a question from Olalekan Oladeji. I think I got his name correct, yes. He's saying, what are the effects of adopting Orosanya's report on employment and governance?
Yeah, so there would be some effect. The thing, though, that we should always bear in mind is that the public service does not contribute that much to the employment figures of our country, right? So maybe you give or take. I don't know the current numbers, but in the days that I was in government, it was something about 2 million or thereabouts total people in the public sector, right? So in terms of what number you would have to deal with when you shut down agencies that are proliferated all over the place. Some of the agencies have a complete lack of mission. They just came into being because it was politically gratifying for the people who set them up at that time to set them up, or because people just chose the better option. There is a problem, let's just set up an agency and then employ people who do only reading the newspaper, having a good chat, and then being paid. So we've got a lot of slack within the public sector. But what you do in order to ensure that you're not losing those people whose skills are important to continue to give you a good a public service is to be very, very rigorous. That report needs to go through a quick review so that you can update it. They need to update it quickly, and then they need to crunch a lot of numbers afresh. Because it would not be worth it to create social tension by making the wrong moves. You need to make the right moves, and when you make the right moves, you made the right moves, because some of the costs of governance that's translated through these bureaucracies is also reflecting in the barriers to doing business. Some of the agencies exist to frustrate business people. That's the only work they do. So there are multiple benefits of really looking at this report and updating it quickly and taking the decisions very fast. The way that you deal with the matter of unemployment that could happen is that you have to design, and I did that when I was Minister of Minerals. You have to design a program of onboarding, for the people that you have to let go. You can design something that enables them to have the tools to engage their new life, their new future, and do it in a way that is sustainable. It did work. Some of the people that we had to do things like that with in the Ministry of Solid Minerals in those days, they became small-scale artisanal miners. We're better off getting more people who are sitting in offices doing nothing, now being active entrepreneurs. Isn't that so? So frankly speaking, it could be a win-win for our society. It really could be if we implement this well.
Beyond government, to an average young person who is out of school, no job, has a smartphone, is on Twitter, is on Facebook, what would you tell this person to be? How prepared should they be for the future of work post-COVID?
They already have all the tools. If you can be on Twitter, my goodness, instead of spending your time, getting into conversations that are not productive for you, my goodness, you're better off than some still more than 50%. Maybe Fatou would know that better than I do. She's in the tech space. The fact that you are actually linked in. Oh wow! I just did a plug for LinkedIn. That the fact that you're connected to the world of technology by having a device, by having the capacity to buy data, to connect and to interact, means that all you need to do is to use the same system that you've got to learn some basic skills that the digital world is now thriving on. There is so much in terms of the global economy. I reckon that, I think current digital economy as a percentage of the global GDP is something in the neighborhood of maybe 8%, or maybe it's even gotten to about 11%. But I think that a decade from now, it is estimated that it will be something in the neighborhood of 25%. Now that's going to be significant. So the world is your oyster as a young person. Don't you dare say that, forget the government. Just forget the government for now, and create a larger government, because that space that you are part of is a government unto itself, and you can learn new skills. The definition of work during your own time has changed. When I see my sons and I see their colleagues and I see them in their everyday work, you guys can work for 23 hours of the day. And sometimes people see you lying down somewhere in the park with your whatever, and they think you're whiling away your time, but you're working. You know,
Right.
so this definition of work means that no young person should make the mistake of saying, I'm waiting to go and wear a suit and a tie. You know, frankly speaking, I keep wondering what I would be doing if I were in my early 20s now. My goodness, I would just rock this world of digital opportunity. As you know, just I would maximize it. I would squeeze all the values that I
think
make, because
you're still
this is the
you're still
time to be a learner. Just be a learner.
I think you're doing just that, and you're doing very well at it as well.
I didn't hear that.
So
I didn't hear that, Mercy.
I think you're doing very well at that.
I'm trying. I'm trying.
There's a John Woolley. I don't know if I got the
Thank
name
you.
correct. He's
Thank you.
saying, what is your take on the call for restructuring and the future of federalism in Nigeria?
I think that I alluded to that already when I talked about the need for us to have a conversation around economic governance. You know, we definitely would have to discuss the structure of Nigeria and how it impedes our productivity and competitiveness as a people. You know, this whole idea that we can just, you know, remain the way we are and just manage to scrape by is not working. We have a structural issue. When you have a structural problem, you solve it structurally. And so a conversation around how to make a federal structure work better is an important one. And the thing is that, you know, the politicians that we have today have no interest in this. They like the way it is. There's no feet to their fire. You know, or rather, there's no fire to their feet. There's nothing. They feel no pressure whatsoever to engage in this conversation, and that's why, you know, when you see the Nigerians who were saying, "Oh, thank God, oil price has collapsed," part of why they were saying that is because they are thinking, it is going to force this conversation that these guys have been avoiding. We will ultimately have to come to the table and have a conversation. But I wouldn't want a conversation that is, you know, in the usual pattern of rhetorics and anecdotes. It has to be one that we prepare for by deep studies that will show us where our opportunities have been, but where we have been because of the structural impediment in the way that we are constituted. It would have to be, you know, based on studies that show us where the barriers are and how we can, by restructuring ourselves in a certain kind of way, we can optimize the productivity and the competitiveness in a collective kind of way. And frankly, a part of what upsets people is anything that sort of says we need to continue with a structure that takes us on a race to the bottom. The current structure takes us on a race to the bottom. It's always the lowest common denominator that becomes our frontier. That becomes almost our goal. It shouldn't be. We should be on a race to the top. So our restructuring conversation must be one that sets us on the path to just keep, you know, racing to the top, not to the bottom.
I'll probably ask you a few more questions before. There's a question by Olare Bosala. I don't know if I got her name correctly. In the choice between live and livelihood, how do you see the decision to gradually unlock? Okay, I think the question is about the lockdown, because I had seen another question before hers that someone was asking you if you think the idea by government to gradually, you know, resume skeletal operations across. We've seen the report by government yesterday for the banks, for some of the senior servants at the Federal Secretariat to resume in Lagos, in Abuja, and in Ogun. Do you think that resumption would help this pandemic?
I tweeted on this about a couple of days ago, where I said that it is, of course, a very tough decision to make, because, you know, the things that you must do in order to curtail spread are the things that end up debilitating the economic livelihood of your people. So there's a tension between these two ideals. And when you have this kind of a tension, you now have to take the list of the troublesome options that you have. And I think that what I worried about is that when you put life and livelihood, it means that life has to come before livelihood, because you've got to be alive in order to think of livelihood, right? So
right.
in terms of sequencing, that's the way you process it. That's the way you think of it. So what I then said in my piece, in my thread that I did, was that if indeed the lockdown has to be gradually ended, then what must happen is that the government must prove that it has taken all the prior actions that would give this level of safeguards to life all the same. So how do you safeguard lives without a lockdown? And some of the countries have shown that by massively educating the people to just be the agents of the prevention, meaning every of the hygiene protocol, they making sure that you're observing the protocol of hygiene. You sneeze by elbowing toward your sneeze. You wash your hands frequently. You maintain safe distance, safe physical distance, and all those things that are personal to you that you can do. But one thing that we have not done well is to do this kind of elaboration in a massive scale. There are adverts and things in the radio, but I wonder how many people even know exactly what it is we're talking about yet. And so our whole orientation to prepare our society for this new normal, I think it is less than should be. And so we don't have that as a prior action that we have delivered on. And the second prior action is that wearing face mask has been proven scientifically to actually curtail spread, because the wearing the face mask, when I wear a face mask, I'm actually not protecting myself, I'm protecting you. When you wear a face mask, you're not protecting yourself, you're protecting me. So we wear masks in order to protect one another, right? So and right now there is a cost to getting masks and making sure that everybody would have access to the mask, so that it becomes part of our apparel. When I dress up in the morning, I not only put on my earrings, on my glasses, I also put on my mask. So, but there is an economic cost that is entailed in that. Our low-income class, how are they going to, pay for this? That governments have also thought of that, and they have used it as a way of ensuring that they are stepping up the production and access to these kinds of things. So we haven't done quite a lot of that. And, so for me, those prior actions are important to safeguard life. And then when people go out, they can be comfortable to then engage in economic activities. I can bet that there are some people, some businesses that are simply going to say, I am not yet trustful of who is walking into the door of my business. So I don't want a situation where I open my shop and then people who have carried coronavirus and are asymptomatic just come and then they catch the coronavirus. That becomes an entirely different thing for them. So the sequencing of this decision, that's so we, the sequencing of this decision has not generated the level of confidence that I want us to have in moving it forward.
I probably have to ask you. Okay, our time is. I wanted to ask another question, but our time is up. We have just 2 minutes left. I want to say happy birthday to you. On Tuesday, it was your birthday. I was supposed to start with that, but again, we started late, then I forgot completely. Happy birthday. Wishing you many more years of goodness. Thank you for inspiring a generation of women in Nigeria, across the world, and everywhere you go to. We're proud of you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Everybody that joined in and asked their questions, we are glad you joined us, and it was quite an interactive session. Thank you so much, Dr. Oby. Have a good
Thank
evening.
you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.